Happy Friday. Tons going on, and next week is going to be a big week when it comes to litigation against Illinois' gun ban. And we've been covering it all and bringing it to you, and a bit of a preview now here with Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. You can always follow me anywhere, Bishop on Air. Just search, and you'll be able to find all the work I do, the videos, the news articles, and more. So be sure to check that out. Also, you can find my work at thecentersquare.com, where we post reports regularly, including this one, that Illinois' gun ban is in federal court on Wednesday. And this, of course, is from the consolidated cases that are in the Southern District of Illinois. The governor saying this week that there are limits to the Second Amendment, but next week he's going to have to defend that position in federal court. So what are we looking at here? Well, Wednesday, the governor said that the gun and magazine ban that he enacted January 10th, it's meant to curb gun violence. And we heard that quote yesterday and the day before, where he talked about how it has limits, and people pushing back saying there aren't limits because of the Second Amendment's clause shall not be infringed. And what that ultimately means is not a regulation on citizens, but a restriction on what government can do. They shall not infringe. Similar to the First Amendment, you can't abridge free speech or, restrict the press or tell people what associations they can be part of or what religion they have to conduct. So you've got, the interpretation of the Second Amendment that's very much in federal court. So what's going to happen is you've got the arguments that have been pushed back and forth, including from the state. The state's argued that modern firearms were not in common use when the Second Amendment was ratified in 1788, and the state's laws look to address dramatic technological changes that created weapons beyond self-defense. So we've talked to various parties in all of this and reviewed a lot of the filings, and we're looking at, of course, the governor making his statements about what exactly he thinks the Second Amendment is all about. Here's the governor this week.
There is a Second Amendment to the Constitution, but there are limits to what that means.
So what are those limits? Well, he goes on to say that it includes guns that can't be owned.
One thing it doesn't mean is that everybody in every circumstance should be able to get a hold of every gun.
But again, the state arguing that semi-automatic weapons and rifles in particular, like an AR-15, we've heard the rhetoric, weapons of war. The legislature redefined these weapons as assault weapons, and then they prohibited the future sale of them. And starting October 1st, you've got the registration that state police are going to open up for those who are grandfathered in with these weapons to register those with state police. But it's not just the firearms ban, it's also the magazine ban. And both of those things, you have another element of the Protect Illinois Communities Act, also called PICA. You'll hear that a lot whenever you talk with the lawyers in all of this. PICA, the next phase, actually kicks in on Monday. And we talked about that in extensive detail, about how you can't have semi-automatic rifles or handguns that match the description of what lawmakers call assault weapons. You have to have them in a case, unloaded. If you're transporting it, you can only have them on private property with the property owner's consent. And what that means for, say, private or even public gun stores or public shooting ranges. So you've got questions around that. But also the magazine ban. The ban is you can't have magazines over 10 rounds for rifles and over 15 rounds for handguns. But as we heard from Todd Vandermeide, gun rights advocate, he says a lot of these magazines that come with a firearm, they may have 14 rounds in the magazine, the capacity for 14 rounds, but you can remove the base plate on a lot of these. It's common. You can remove the base plate, which the law essentially says if it's something that can be converted into an extended magazine, it is therefore banned. So what's going to happen here? You've got, of course, again, that triggering April 10th, which is Monday, where you could face criminal penalties if you are found to be in possession of these types of weapons or these types of magazines, and it's a petty offense with a $1,000 fine for having the magazine, and it's either a Class 3 or Class 2 felony, depending on how many times you've been charged for having a banned weapon out in public that is outside of what's prescribed by the law. So this obviously is there's a lot of attention. 2.4 million gun owners in Illinois. That's why there were lawsuits that were filed. The first lawsuit that was filed was in Crawford County. It was a state level court that was brought by attorney Thomas Magg, and he was challenging the PICA statute on grounds of Second Amendment, but also on Fifth Amendment, because it says that you can't force somebody, you can't compel somebody to tell government that they own something that the government has redefined as illegal. That violates your Fifth Amendment rights of not having to self-incriminate. Now, that was transferred from state court to federal courts in the Southern District, and then you had several other federal lawsuits that were filed by the State Rifle Association, by the National Shooting Sports Foundation, and also by federal firearms licensees of Illinois. All four of those cases, the three with the Crawford case, those are in the Southern District. It's going to be heard April 12th on Wednesday. I've got my press credentials to be in the courtroom, so we will definitely bring you the latest there. So if you want to stay updated, again, follow Bishop on Air on Twitter. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube page, Bishop on Air, and you can follow along that way as well. So we'll have the latest there. But some of the arguments, we heard the states, they say that these rifles have they weren't around when the Second Amendment was ratified in 1788. Thomas Magg, he says that the hyperbole the state uses is absurd.
It is so far out of the realm that I can't believe that a lawyer actually wrote it. I mean, that tells me the governor himself or the attorney general himself is just playing politics with this.
So, again, you've got various things kicking in April 10th. A little bit later on in the show, we're actually going to talk with a group that's raising the alarm of hunters needing to know what kinds of shotguns they can have out in the field. So we'll talk about that in more detail later on. But back to the lawsuits, you've got an interesting twist here when it comes to the Southern District courts. McHenry County State's Attorney's Office is a defendant in the Southern District, but up in the Northern District, they're a plaintiff. They filed a lawsuit in McHenry County against PICA, and that was transferred from state court to federal court. So now that's in the Northern District of the federal courts in Illinois. But down in the Southern District, the McHenry County State's Attorney's Office is a defendant. And I talked with the Assistant State's Attorney, Troy Owens, out of McHenry County, and he said that, it puts them in a unique position. Here's Troy Owens.
We're the only defendant in the Southern District who's taken the position that the plaintiff's deck action injunction should issue because PICA is unconstitutional based upon Bruin. And
the Bruin decision being that U.S. Supreme Court case from last summer that plaintiffs in these cases say is a new standard that courts have to follow, that the courts can no longer look at gun control legislation through the lens of a balanced approach of balancing public safety interests with fundamental civil liberties. They have to look at the text and tradition of the Second Amendment when they analyze and determine the constitutionality of gun control legislation. So those are the arguments we're going to hear. And that's going to happen Wednesday. But again, Monday, you've got the PICA statute kicking in 90 days after implementation, January 10th. That's April 10th. And that's when you're not going to be able to have certain types of firearms. You can't carry certain magazines with your carry gun if you are a concealed carry license holder, and a variety of other things kicking in. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail about that coming up with a guest after 7:30 this morning. So looking forward to that conversation, but wanted to give you a preview of what's going to be happening next week when it comes to the ongoing litigation against Illinois' gun